Hello, this is the final project presentation for Gerardo Castro, Jenna Freeman, and Aisha Riaz. I do want to apologize if there's any excess background noise. I live in the city and it can be loud outside. So a quick introduction to our unit. Our unit focuses on the introduction, practice, and application of figurative language in a fourth grade classroom. Specifically, we're hoping that students will learn how to identify and utilize figurative language in their writing and their reading, specifically within poetry. We are going to introduce the students to 3 types of figurative language: similes, metaphors, and idioms. And students will complete a series of tasks that assess their understanding of the different elements that we're introducing them to of figurative language. And we're making sure to incorporate a variety of modalities just to make sure that students are able to share their learning regardless of their learning style. The learners for this unit are 4th grade students who are 9 to 10 years old. They're in a monolingual classroom, and the majority of them are fluent in English. However, there are some who are stronger in Spanish than English. The majority of the students are Caucasian, with a few Black and Hispanic students as well, and about half the class is reading at grade level right now. The students who speak Spanish better than they speak English or are receiving EL support or qualified to receive EL support receive EL support from a resource teacher daily, and they will have that teacher support throughout the unit as well. The standards that we're focusing are demonstrating an understanding of figurative language, word relationships, and nuances in word meaning, as well as explaining the meaning of simple similes, metaphors, and context. So for our objectives for this unit, objective number 1 is that students will be able to demonstrate an understanding of figurative language by utilizing it in their own poetry and identifying it in the poems given to them with 85% accuracy. We created this objective with the intention of identifying and assessing students' ability to create their own examples of figurative language within their poetry. And we chose poetry because it lends itself to being the most easily, that you can insert figurative language the most easily into poetry. And we also find that it's most often exhibited in poetry. So that was our way of trying to get students to identify it in their reading. Objective number 2 is that students will be able to explain the meaning of simple similes and metaphors in the poems given to them with 85% accuracy. Again, that is the specific elements of figurative language that we want them to understand within their reading. And the last objective is students will be able to explain the meaning of idioms by identifying the idioms in the Flipgrid videos created by their classmates with 85%. So the intention behind this was we are going to have a different, as I addressed earlier, different modalities for students to demonstrate their understanding of figurative language. And one of the tasks that we're going to have our students do is record a Flipgrid video in groups where they're acting out an idiom. For example, if they're acting out "It's raining cats and dogs," they might bring in cat and dog stuffed animals and have someone standing with a raincoat and dropping them above their heads, but making it a more interactive and a fun and engaging way that doesn't always have that language barrier incorporated as well. And we thought that would be really helpful for the EL students, especially in a time when kids are so focused on recording themselves on YouTube and TikTok. So the main prescriptive design strategy is Hunter's direct instruction, and it's a decision-making model for planning instruction. When designing the lessons, the teacher needs to consider the 7 elements in order to, in the order that they're placed, to make sure that everything has a relationship with each other. And the 7 steps of Hunter's direct instruction are the anticipatory set, which, as you can see by this graphic, we really like. You hook them in and you try and connect background knowledge or prior knowledge. The second step is identifying the objective or the purpose. Tell them why they're learning it and why they need to know this. The third is inputs, is student input. So students need knowledge, skills, and the process is to understand these concepts. So you need to provide those. Modeling is step number 4. We're going to show them in a concrete way, which I will explain to you in a couple of slides. Check for understanding with assessments, guided practice, let them do it with teacher supervision, independent practice, let them do it by themselves, and closure as well. Guided and independent practice are interchangeable as under the 7 steps. That's why there's 8 here. So we also wanted to incorporate different elements of technology into our unit. So students have access to Chromebooks or iPads, and they'll also be using Flipgrid while they're to record their videos. So through their Chromebooks and their iPads, they will have access to Flipgrid. They'll also have access to Google Classroom, which is an LMS system, and that's where the majority of the assessments, the poetry writing and such, will be located and housed. Students, the value added of this technology is that it makes the lesson a lot more accessible, because originally these lessons would have been taught in just a traditional way where the teacher gets up in front of the class and presents things and students fill out a worksheet. But the use of the Flipgrid and the videos and having students create their own idiom posters, which I will explain later on, allows for that accessibility and collaboration and continued student engagement. And the video specifically increases the visual and the visual learning and enhanced learning of students to make sure that we're hitting different learning strategies. So for the day-to-day description, day 1 is just direct instruction, introduction of figurative language. Day 2, continued direct instruction and input checking for understanding with a little bit of independent and guided practice. Day 3, direct instruction continues. And I will, on the next slide, get more into the examples of the direct instruction. Followed by group work, creating the flip grids and commenting on them, and a final assessment. So for the student handouts, the first thing that students will have is a presentation that will be used to present figurative language to the concepts to the students. So this is just explaining to them what figurative language is and getting the basics out there, the anticipatory set, letting them understand what we're learning about today, giving them the objectives, providing examples just to get the conversation started about figurative language. Why is it important that we use this figurative language in our world? Different examples. We are giving them more examples just so that they understand the figurative language isn't just referencing similes, metaphors, and idioms, but there's multiple other things that can be incorporated under that umbrella. Then a direct example of a simile, a metaphor, and an idiom. And if you see underneath, we have links to, in the speaker notes, links to YouTube videos that give that other, it's not just the direct instruction through a slideshow. It also has a video that has a catchy song for different levels of input for students to try and get them to understand it as best as possible and make it as meaningful as possible. So then the next thing we're going to do is a sort that the students will complete after learning about the similes and metaphors, which is going to be day 1 is similes and metaphors. So this is the sort where students are going to have to read these two or read each of these things and then identify, is it a simile or a metaphor? Which we decided to do it that way because it seems like those are the two elements that can often get confused or misidentified. So we wanted to make sure that they understand the difference in they both compare things, and we wanted to make sure students understand the different methods for comparison. We also are going to provide students with a reference handout that they can use. So we are introducing similes and metaphors one day, idioms the next day, and we're going to provide students with this handout just so that they can have a reference when they're completing their work, because we're not assessing if they can identify these things right after we teach them. We want them to have a reference while they're learning. the thing that we were extremely excited about was students working on idiom projects, creating posters in small groups. So these are the instructions that we're going to provide for the students. They're going to have a piece of paper, split their paper in half, write their idiom, and on one side they're going to draw the literal picture and definition, and on the other side draw the figurative one. And this ends up just being a really fun activity where the kids get excited to draw the idioms because it's so silly to look at. And they have a lot of fun guessing what their peers were creating. And additionally, we have this assessment that students will use where this will be in their LMS on Google Classroom, that they'll be assigned and asked to identify the figurative language within these poems. They'll be asked to identify specifically similes and metaphors. Also to create their own poetry incorporating these different figurative language elements. So we're kind of continually assessing throughout this unit with the independent tasks, with the small group tasks, and eventually with the completed assessment. We are also having students create, as I said earlier, Flipgrid videos where they're going to enact or act out an idiom. And with Flipgrid, you have the ability to post a video and then comment on the video. And we are going to have students comment on each other's videos with the intention of guessing what idiom they were representing in their video. And we chose this method because the students who might be a little bit fearful of participating in class, it modifies the technology by allowing them to comment online where they're not in a situation where they have to do public speaking. And lastly, these are our sample, So this is a drawing of what students can create for their idiom posters. This person is under the weather, and in the first side, you see that they are physically standing underneath the weather. And on the other side, it's the literal meaning, which is when you're not feeling well. And then there's also the explanation of under the weather means that someone isn't feeling well and they are sick. We do also have another example for students who feel more comfortable using technology and they might not enjoy drawing or coloring. They might not feel as artistic and they feel like they can express themselves better digitally. They have the option of creating the same assignment on Canva. So the idiom is it's raining cats and dogs. And as you can see here, it's raining cats and dogs. And the literal meaning is that there's a heavy downpour. So it shows the difference between the figurative and the literal meaning within the examples. There is also an online digital content component. We created a website where this will be posted within the LMS as well, and they can go to this to reference it. One of the best parts about this is that when students are working on whatever homework assignments they might have regarding figurative language, they have this website to go back and reference the different components that they have learned about, the different videos that they've seen in class, so that they can review some things that they might have forgotten or not caught on to totally. They have the ability to use their computers to search up meanings of idioms or definitions that they're not completely sure of. And they can use, for the Spanish-speaking students, they can use Google Translate or bring in idioms from the Spanish language to share with their peers. So the conceptual categorization that we identified is overall this unit is an example of redefinition based on the SAMR model, and we kind of just explained how we got there. So we originally, just the substitution is when the students use their electronic devices to complete the same work that they would normally do on paper. But then it moves up to augmentation when they use technology to listen to songs and use online resources to complete their assignment. Then it evolves into modification when they get to record and share their videos of the idioms with their classmates. But ultimately, we felt it landed on redefinition because students get to comment on their peers' videos and try to guess the idiom that they are presenting, whereas this would not have been something that could have happened digitally in the past when students were just drawing idioms on paper. For the summative evaluation, we have a two-part assessment, which I showed you earlier, where students can identify and utilize figurative language within their assessment piece on the LMS. Also, the Flipgrid video it correlates with objective number 3. We also plan to assess the effectiveness of the unit's design through an end of the unit survey to ask which parts of this unit did you find the most helpful, which were the most stressful, or which did you find weren't so helpful for you. A daily exit slip, just checking in about maybe the figurative language element that they learned or the different parts of the lesson that they found were successful or not successful. We also want to do a student evaluation of the technology tools so they can share their thoughts on the presentation software like Flipgrid, specifically how user-friendly they feel that it was and how confident they felt utilizing this tool in the future. We do like to use Flipgrid because it's such an interactive tool, but we want to make sure that students feel confident and comfortable using it. And doing a student survey where they evaluate the technology tools will provide us with that understanding. That's it. Thank you so much for listening, and have a good day.